So I've been waiting a long time to have this amazing woman on. I've known Annette for how long has it been now? Like 4 years?
Hmm.
Yeah. So we met in 2020. It was the day of the NRL grand final, and we were at a protest. And I think there was only like 20 of us, and it was pissing down rain. And I remember you limping in pain. I'm thinking, what's wrong with this girl? But little did I know that you have 20 cats, which has grown to 30 since I've known you. And you rescued a cat that morning, a cat that fell in your tank. And yeah, it was like destiny. We were meant to meet. And ever since then, it's been an incredible journey. So, Annette, you do a lot of animal rescuing. You're an editor. You do a lot of videography. Tell us a bit about what you do.
Yeah, so I do this thing called TNR, which is trap, neuter, release. And that's basically trapping stray cats on the street, getting them desexed, and releasing them back on the street so that they don't repopulate. And I release most of them, but I have kept quite a few of them because, sometimes there's reasons why they just can't go back to where they came from. And so yeah, I have like 35 cats. So I am a cat lady. And I also have ducks as well because there's also a duck dumping problem. My background is in media. So mostly like I specialize in editing. I went to film school. I do photography. I used to operate cameras and I even vision switched at one point, that kind of thing.
So I know in the last few years you've been going down the path of syncretism and doing a lot of reading and researching into that. And I feel like from what I've seen out there, I have not found someone who's quite at your level. And I really wanted to get you on because of the Olympic Games opening ceremony. Can you tell us what you have picked up in all of that?
I haven't even watched the whole thing yet, to be honest. But I want to focus on the most popular one that everyone's talking about because there's so many people decoding it online, and I don't want to be another person that's just throwing out these little snippets of knowledge that doesn't really help anyone. Like we could talk about the pale horse, we could talk about the golden calf, but I would rather focus on the Last Supper because that's where the big secret is hiding. Is it's in that symbolism there. A lot of people know about the Da Vinci Code, so I don't know. Have you watched it, the Da Vinci Code?
I have watched it, but it was a long time ago. So
So
those
I don't know if you remember that they talked about the Last Supper, the painting, and what they did there was they revealed a little bit of truth, and then they just like any other psyop, they give you some truth, and then they send you down the wrong path. Like they kind of wedge the truth in between lies. I mean, this is how all psyopses work. I've managed to figure out like where they were lying about that, and it is a really important message because in the sort of truther community, a lot of people focus on the things they can't control. And when you learn this really like important secret that they've basically been hiding from us explicitly, but shoving in our face subtly, it's a life changing knowledge because now you go from sort of just being frustrated about, everything being a big lie to now going, oh my God, I've got work to do, you know? And then you focus on yourself. You focus on your own spiritual evolution and you realize, okay, this is how we fight the system, not, not through having knee-jerk reactions and being triggered and complaining. I don't want to be just another person that has opinions because we've got enough of that. We've got enough people throwing their opinions around, and the world doesn't need more of that because that's how it's how we became such a dysfunctional society to start with, because we kind of blindly believe authority figures, whether it's scientific authority, government agency authorities, religious authority, whatever it is, we just blindly believe, even though we don't even realize we're doing it. And so syncretism, the beauty of syncretism is it introduces you to a whole new level of consciousness where it's not about blind belief, but it's about knowing, because if something is true, it needs to be true from multiple angles. And so when you start seeing, and this is what I think a lot of my followers are realizing through following my stories, is that they're seeing the same thing being shown from so many different angles and continuously as well. Like, I'm not talking about just books that have already been written, movies that have already been made. I'm talking about things that are going to happen tomorrow, things that happened yesterday, things that are going to happen next week. And it's just at the point where like we're predicting stuff now. You know what I mean? Like we're actually kind of predicting stuff. That's how true it is. But in saying that, they have set traps for syncretists as well. So there are some extremely intelligent syncretists who have not cracked the code that I cracked because the traps have been set. And so even when you do syncretism, you still need to be careful. If you don't have discernment and intuition, which is something that you get from being in touch with your heart. And so if you don't have that, you can easily fall into these traps and still not actually see what's really important. It's been interesting to see all the controversy online. I feel like everyone is talking about this at the moment. Even though I don't agree, like obviously it was offensive, you can be so offended that you're blinded to what they're actually like, because
what's being
exposing.
exposed.
Yeah. Exactly, because that was very deliberate. Like they're not stupid. They did that to provoke us, and it worked.
They can say, "But we told you," and you
exactly.
were just we told you, we showed
exactly.
you. It was all there in your face, but you were just too caught up in your little emotions there to really understand what was being told underneath all of that.
Absolutely, that's exactly right. And so they can just say, well, it's your blood on your hands. We told you. It all reminds me of when I was at film school about 15 years ago, and we were in a class where they introduced us to the teachings of Joseph Campbell. And so Joseph Campbell, you probably heard of the hero's journey. And so basically what they were telling us, what they were showing us is all the similarities, some of the similarities between ancient mythology, stories in ancient mythology, and stories in the Bible. I had just graduated from Bible college, actually, just a couple of years prior to that. And so I was a Christian at the time, but I was very open-minded. Like Christianity was what I was raised in. It's what I knew. I was in my mid-20s, and but I was open-minded. But there was another Christian in the class, and he really struggled with that class. Like it really offended him and really upset him. I remember like that being the big opening. Wow, it seems to be true, right? It seems to be true that all these stories in the Bible seem to be recycling older stories from ancient mythology. Like it was kind of undeniable, really. It's kind of undeniable. And so I approached a bunch of Christians in my life and I said, what are your thoughts on this? And they all pretty much fully rejected it and just didn't want to hear it because it was just too triggering. Or the other thing that they would say was that all of those stories were prophesying what was to come. So they were like prophecies. This ceremony, like even though it was offensive and it was inappropriate and it was a bit perverted, but the silver lining is that it's got people en masse having this conversation about the similarities between the biblical stories and ancient mythology. And I think the reason why people don't like to have that conversation is because they think that as soon as you recognize the similarities, that means that it takes value and importance and meaning away from the stories. Because it's like, oh, these are just all the same stories being retold. That means the stories have no meaning and no value. But that's not it at all. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the complete opposite. What people don't realize is when you're watching a film, it's like most likely that each character is playing a different chakra and two stories are being told at the same time.
When you say two stories are being told at the same time, do you mean that it's like one story is just telling you about, I don't know, a romantic love story or like some sort of typical, catchy theme, right? That's going to get our emotions and we're just going to get emotionally invested in it. And the other story underneath all that is the esoteric symbolism and information that they're trying to give us, or the messages that they're trying to share with us about what this is or why we're here or whatever.
They're the messages that they need to tell us in order to meet the obligations of the universal law of free will.
Yes. And those messages are pretty much exposing what this is, how we can attain a level of expansion or connection to our higher self, sort of thing.
Exactly. It's actually a skill to be able to tell two stories at the same time, right? When it comes to the story of Jesus and the 12 disciples, and now when I talk about any stories in any holy books, I'm talking about them as stories, not as historical events. Not because I don't think that some of them have been blended with real historical events or real historical people. It's just because I don't own a time machine. And so I'm not someone that runs on opinions and blind belief. I can't just, a lot of people get really funny and they say, oh, that's not a story, it really happened. And my next question is, well, when are you going to take me for a ride in your time machine? Because how do you know? Like, I don't understand. Like, we can only work with what we have, and we've got the texts, right? And so when I talk about any stories in any holy books, I'm talking about them as stories. So no one should be offended that I call them stories. So with the Jesus story, there's 12 disciples, right? Now, it's interesting because we're usually either dealing with chakras or we're dealing with zodiacs, right? And so each zodiac, so there's 12 disciples, 12 zodiacs, right? And so each zodiac actually governs a different area of the body. And chakras fall into some of those areas. The Jesus story is particularly interesting, and not just the Jesus story, but a bunch of stories in the Bible, like the story of Jacob and his 13 children, right? Most people will say 12 sons, but I say 13 children. Because look, you've also got 13 in here. You've got the 12 disciples and Jesus, so it's actually 13. And you can start to understand why the number 13 is significant and why the number 13 is being hidden, revealed, and concealed. So like you got Jesus and the 12 disciples. And so pretty much how it works is it starts with Aries at the top and it ends in Pisces. And so it goes from Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, and then it goes on to Libra, Scorpio, and all the way down to Pisces, right? So basically, this is the higher mind. That's the lower mind. So Taurus is the lower mind. It's also the throat. And so there's a chakra there. There's a chakra here. That's the third eye. There's a throat chakra there. Then there's Cancer, Gemini.
Yeah.
And so you know that because he's got his hands up, because Gemini rules the hands and the arms, and it's twins. So that's how you remember that's Gemini. And then this one, some people like say that this one is Cancer, that's Cancer, and that's Leo and all that's like, it's kind of like, I don't know how important it is. It's because one's bum is closer to here, but one's head is closer. So it's like, which one is it? I don't think it's even that important. But one of them's Cancer, one of them's Leo. Then you have Virgo, and then it keeps going down. You've got Scorpio that's holding his hand up like the scorpion's tail. You've got Libra that's holding his arms out like the scales, the Libra scales. And then all the way down to Pisces. And so Jesus is there for a reason. He's right in the middle because, so this one is the solar plexus, right? And that's the womb. So anyone who's familiar with the Da Vinci Code will remember that they did point out that that is the womb. So this one here, whether it's Cancer or Leo, I don't know, is pointing at his throat and saying, look, there's no Adam's apple there, right?
Oh, so it's a woman. Virgo,
it's a woman.
the woman. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so exactly. It's Virgo. And so in the Da Vinci Code, they say that that's Mary Magdalene, right?
Mm.
But I think, so they say it's the womb, which is correct because that's the solar plexus. And that's where, sorry?
The woman, is it because the woman has the womb as well? Is that why? No.
No. Here's where it gets interesting. You know the symbolism about men can have babies too?
Mm.
Okay. It's because even men have a solar plexus. Everyone has a solar plexus. So the womb is not the uterus, it's the solar plexus.
Wow.
Because that's where the son is born, right? Now, Christians get really offended when you make the connection between Jesus and the sun in the sky, because they're like, oh, but that's sun worship. But the sun is symbolism as well. Like, just like the bee in the insect world, it symbolizes the same thing as the sun. If you think about it, the bee gives life, like it goes around pollinating, and we probably wouldn't be alive without the bee, like we wouldn't be alive without the sun. And so people, it's like people just don't know where the symbolism ends. So some people will end it at the sun and they'll say, Jesus is the sun. But even the sun is another level of symbolism because this is a matrix. Nothing here is real,
Simulation, yeah. Oh, can I say that word?
Exactly. I mean, it's not that it's not real. It's just, it's a copycat of something else, something bigger. This is not the real world. So she represents the womb. Where they went wrong with the Da Vinci Code, which obviously is deliberate, is they then went to say, oh, well, that was Mary Magdalene. But see, it's a half lie because Mary Magdalene does represent an aspect of the feminine principle, just like Mary, mother of Jesus. But it's a different aspect. So actually, if Mary Magdalene was in here, she would be sitting right here, not there. Now you ask,
she'd be Cancer?
No, it should be Leo. Like the next question is, okay, why would they do that? Why would they say it's Mary Magdalene when it's not? It's because Mary Magdalene she's one personification, one character that represents the big secret, right? Which is the heart, because Leo rules the heart. And so, how at the Olympic Games, they had the Dionysus character, the blue man, and he's covered in like the grapevines. People got really offended about that. Like it was so distasteful and there was no class. I mean, it was all deliberate. They were deliberately provoking everyone. So I'm not discounting how bad it was. But that character, there's a lot of talk about him online at the moment. When I looked into Dionysus, the first thing I wanted to know was, did he descend into the underworld? Because Jesus descended into the underworld when he was in the tomb. And the answer was yes. There's all these similarities and people can deny it all they want, but it's really undeniable. And the wine thing, like the grapes and the wine, like wine represents the union, the marriage of the divine feminine and divine masculine, which is the heart and the third eye, right? And Mars in the throat gets caught up in that because it's in the middle. Wine, so that's why Jesus turned water into wine at a wedding, because it represents the marriage of the opposites.
The union.
And the union of the opposites. So the alchemical union, right? Alchemical is the alchemy, it's about transformation. And so okay, so you've got that. So there's that wine connection. There's so many connections. But what I really wanted to know the most was, and this is where it got really interesting, I went looking to see if Dionysus had was ever reborn, had a rebirthing experience that involved the heart or someone that represents the heart.
Just quickly, that's a Greek mythological character, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I wanted to know, did he have an experience of being reborn that involved the heart or someone that personified the heart? Because John the Baptist personified the heart. He was heart and throat, right?
And
he
that's
was Venus and
another
Mars.
story. Is that another story?
That's in the gospel. So that's the Jesus story.
Okay. Yeah.
So John the Baptist baptized Jesus, right? That's why we do baptisms, because it was all based on Jesus being baptized by John the Baptist. And so John the Baptist, because John the Baptist represents the heart, that was like showing that the heart is like a key that unlocks something, that it purifies, it transforms, right? So think about it. Jesus is born in the solar plexus, right? He then has and you'll see this. I might sound like a crazy person, but trust me, you'll start seeing it everywhere once you know. It's all about raising it. So he's like on the microcosm, Jesus represents like the divine spark, the seed, the sacred secretion. It's basically the gift from heaven, right? That's the gift from heaven. So
can we just point out that gift is what comes into all of us
exactly
when the moon enters our sun sign?
Well, I'm not sure about
sign.
that. Look, I'm not. The thing is that when it comes to those little fine details about when it happens and all that, I know that a lot of people go by George W. Carey's work, right, which is that book. And I've read this book more than I've read any other book. But what a lot of people don't know is this book is actually full of lies as well. Like it's not all true at all. There's lots of breadcrumbs and clues, and I still read it because it still helps me. But there's a lot of deception in here as well. And so there's some things I don't know, like the timing of it, when it happens, I'm not sure. But one thing I know is that we all have the womb, which is why we've got the symbolism about men can have babies too, because they have it too. It's the solar plexus.
When they say babies, okay, and we're getting triggered about that because they're like, no, men can't have babies. What they're actually meaning is the seed that's born in there.
Exactly.
So again, we're getting an emotional response. I mean, it pisses me off too. But really, underneath that, the second message that's being told is the seed that's being born in men and women. So, yeah.
Exactly. That's right. And so we want to raise the seed in power, right? We want to raise it. But what's the next chakra up? It's the heart. And George W. Carey has gone to great lengths to hide the heart secret. And if people think I'm nuts, right, talking about this, go and watch Stranger Things season 3, episode 1. You've got basically a massive machine, right, with 6 areas that they're exposed, right, and they're lit up. And this machine is designed to open a portal. So there's 6 of those areas in the machine, just like you've got 6 chakras, and then you've got the crown up here. And so it's the third eye chakra that blasts open the portal to the crown, right? And guess how many keys it needs to turn on? It needs 2 keys turned at the same time. Like, I couldn't believe it when I watched that scene, how much they were telling us in that one scene. It was insane. And that's really what it comes down to, is that in order to activate the third eye, which, by the way, is not actually the pineal gland, it's the optic thalamus, you actually need two keys to turn it on. One is the seed that's born in the solar plexus, and the big secret is
The heart.
the heart. And when you look at the Olympic Games at the Last Supper, that what a lot of people were talking about was the fact that there was a lot that it was all trans people, right? And then that, like, adults, like trans adults, and then one child. And where was that child sitting? Right there. And if you're wondering why did they use trans people, well, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the balancing of the opposites, the alchemical marriage. That's the divine feminine and the divine masculine balancing together to form the alchemical marriage. And so it's symbolism. Again, you're getting a person of one sex and that changes their sex, and now they're trans, so they're both sexes combined. They've merged the two energies, the feminine and the masculine. So it's just insanely symbolic. Like, it's just screaming symbolism. But like, so basically the heart is the big secret. So going back to the baptism, so Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist, who represented the heart. And that's why John the Baptist, a lot of people don't really understand, why did Jesus have to be baptized? Like, isn't Jesus, like, you know, the main character? Why does he have to be baptized by this man who, like, basically whose home is the open road and he's preaches in the wilderness? He's just like this mostly off-screen character, you know, but he has to baptize Jesus. Like, what's going on? So that's because John the Baptist represents the heart. And so with Dionysus, the Greek mythological character Dionysus, I just knew straight away when I started to see all the similarities, which a lot of people are not, like, they don't want to hear that, right? That there's similarities. There's so many similarities between them. But like I said, like, it doesn't devalue or take meaning away. It just opens your eyes to a more deeper and profound meaning. It actually makes you realize that there's even more meaning than you originally thought. And it's much more exciting. And so anyway, I was like, okay, did Dionysus have a rebirthing experience that involved the heart, or someone that personified the heart, like Jesus had John the Baptist, right? And he baptized him, which is a rebirth, okay? It's the death of the old self when you go down, and then when you come up, you're a new person. It's a rebirth. You're reborn. And then I looked it up, and then on Britannica.com, it said Dionysus was killed by the Titans, but his heart was saved by Athena. And then it says that Zeus sewed him into his thigh until he reached a mature age, and then he was reborn. So that was a rebirthing that happened from his heart, and then he gets sewn into Zeus's thigh. So where does the thigh start? Sagittarius. Now, what is this area? Because when you look at
show them like the human body at the bottom that you made.
Okay, so that's the chart, so you can see what zodiac rules which.
Yeah.
And it says Sagittarius rules the thigh, right? So Sagittarius rules the thigh, and then from Sagittarius, because Scorpio is where the root chakra is. Libra is where the sacral plexus is.
Yeah.
Now, from here onwards, we're not aware of any chakras, because the chakras that we're aware of are, root, sacral plexus, solar plexus, heart chakra, throat chakra, and third eye chakra, right?
Hmm.
So what's this then? this is the unconscious. This is the era of the unconscious. And so that's hell, right? So that's head is heaven and heel is hell. Pisces is the heel, right? Head heaven, heel hell. And so when Jesus was put in the tomb, he descended to hell and then he came back and he was resurrected. Just like Dionysus. And by the way, the tomb was the heart. Just like when I was a big Christian, I went to Bible college, this knowledge started to come into my awareness in film school. And I could have been like the other guy in my class that fully just rejected it because it triggered me and I just couldn't accept it because it didn't fit into my paradigm of belief, and I could have walked away. And if I did that, there wouldn't have been much progress in my life. Like, we don't realize that we actually act like addicts when information that contradicts our beliefs comes into comes in front of us, and then we can't, like, it's just, we don't have the emotional maturity to deal. We don't have the courage. We don't have the bravery to allow our preconceived beliefs to be challenged. But you know what it ended up for me, what it ended up doing was it ended up clarifying a lot of the instinctive doubts that I had about Christianity when I was younger. For example, I love animals, and I always have. And as a child, I was obsessed with animals. I was raised in a vegetarian home. And I remember thinking as a child, how can I be more compassionate than God? Because God required us at some point, according to the Bible, to sacrifice animals and to kill animals on the altar, to sacrifice them to atone our sins. Like, I was like, it just never sat right with me. And then I had older relatives, like much older relatives, who would say things to me like they were very religious, obviously, and they would say things to me like, oh, do you think you're above God because you don't eat animals? But God didn't tell you that that was a requirement. I would have to cop that kind of stuff growing up. And so even though Christians will say, oh, but we don't sacrifice animals. But the thing is, you believe in a God that required it at one point and didn't require it anymore because he sent his son to be the ultimate sacrifice. Realizing that the Jesus story was not about a blood sacrifice.
It wasn't literal. It was allegorical.
That it was allegorical and it wasn't a literal blood sacrifice theme. It gave me so much peace. Like, I got so much peace from that because finally my gut instinct was telling me as a child there was something wrong with that story. And now it was like, yes, now I have the intellectual knowledge that aligns with that gut instinct. And a lot of people have those experiences where their gut tells them something, but society is saying something else, or their religion is saying something else. For example, think about, 2020, 2021, a certain injection that came out. A lot of people had a gut instinct about it, and now it's coming out. The truth is coming out. And a lot of people are saying, I knew my gut was telling me about that injection. You're here to learn through limitation and to balance the energies, the feminine, masculine energies within yourself to become whole. So, and because hell is accessed through the heart. That's why Jesus said, don't follow the heart, because the heart can deceive, because the heart is in the heart there's a portal to heaven and hell, whereas the solar plexus is a portal from heaven. And that's why gut instinct, you can always trust your gut instinct, because it's God. It's like a channel from heaven. And so it's where you get your intuition when you're heartbroken and when you're in grief and when you're in depression. You're accessing hell through your heart. They've gone to great lengths to hide the heart's role in the process of enlightenment, salvation, the transmutation of the Philosopher's Stone. Like a place where you'll see that theme very strongly is in Stranger Things season 3 and 4. There's a lot of emphasis on childhood traumas. That's why that's why they're creating all these situations to trigger us. With the Olympic Games ceremony was totally that. They're tapping into people's wounds, and they were creating new wounds to be tapped into later when they fulfill their future plans. And so what's coming soon is a plan to basically cause a lot of division, and I really believe that's going to be between Christians and Muslims. It's like the stage has been set, the foundation is there, and they're going to be relying on us being enslaved by our emotions. What we're supposed to do is to turn our wounds and our childhood traumas and our suffering and all that, and to transmute it into gold. We need to ask ourselves, when we react emotionally, when we become triggered, am I in my lead phase? Because remember, lead gets heated up and it puts out toxic fumes. And that gold is like, you can melt it, you can do whatever you want to it, but it doesn't lose its integrity. It's the highest metal, and then lead is the base metal. And so basically the transmutation of the Philosopher's Stone is turning your suffering into wisdom.
Harry Potter, the first movie. I don't know if you watched it, Annette, but at the end, Harry Potter was in possession of the stone because he had a pure heart. And he turned his suffering, which is like his longing and sadness for his parents, he transmuted that suffering into good. And so because of that, he was able to look into the mirror, see his parents, and then possess the stone. And I just wanted to highlight that and just to show people as an example that they are literally showing this symbolically in so many films. And that was one of them. And I was like, oh my God, when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's literally all about the heart and transmuting that suffering that you were talking about. So I just wanted to point that out there.
I'm just sharing what I'm learning. And so many people it's resonating because the truth resonates, right? And so it's resonating with people and they're fascinated by it and they're coming along on the journey. And I'm getting all these messages from people saying, I don't understand what you're saying, but it's really fascinating, and I'm trying to follow you. I'm trying to follow. Yeah. And I'm like, I wait with bated breath for every time you post, blah, blah, blah. And I've realized what they've done is something so cunning. They've created so many cognitive blocks so that people can't comprehend things. You know how NASA has this like map of like, this is the size of the sun and this is the size of Jupiter and this is the size. And it's hard to explain to people that the sun rises in the east and activates as Jupiter, because people go, but isn't the sun so much bigger than Jupiter? Isn't the sun like so much hotter and so much so much brighter and so much bigger than Jupiter? Do you know what I mean? So how does the sun rise and then activate as Jupiter when the sun is bigger than Jupiter? Like, there's just so many. That's just one example, but there's so many things like that.
Already something that's been fed to block that understanding.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So I feel like going deep into all the details can be a bit risky,
Yeah. But it's a work in progress, and every day we're learning more and more, and you're realizing more and more. And that's what people need to understand, that it's not like we have all the answers. It's coming gradually. And because of who you are and what you do, and because you've dealt with a lot of your lower desires and your shadow work, a lot of it has come to you a lot sooner than many other people. But you're still working through all that, and you're still grasping new things every single day. Yeah, it's like,
I have to say, yeah.
Yeah, no, go on. Yeah, what were you going to say?
No, I have to say, I'm glad you brought that up, because I have to say that what I think is going on internally is the heart and the solar plexus are so intimately connected that when you do the shadow work, and it's not just shadow work, that's just one aspect of the heart. The heart, there's all these aspects. There's compassion and empathy, forgiveness, there's love and self-love. there's self-forgiveness, there's loyalty, there's so many different aspects. So a lot of people, they focus on the shadow work, but they're not feeding the homeless or like going out of their way to make life like, because like a lot of this actually requires sacrifice. Like when you give money away to a you know, a, a a good charity, not a fake one, or when you like whatever, you do something nice for someone, it usually means a bit of sacrifice on your behalf. You're sacrificing time, you're sacrificing money, you're sacrificing comforts. A lot of people that they would rather do anything than make sacrifices. You're doing the heart work, which is yeah, shadow work, this, that, like all these different things. It opens up the solar plexus, and the solar plexus, because the heart is a portal to heaven and hell, right? Which is why, like, you know, these characters descend into hell, and they all have something to do with the heart. Like Jesus gets entombed in the heart, and then he enters the underworld through the heart. Because when you're suffering, when you're grieving, when you're like depressed, where are you? You're in hell, right? So, and even Jesus said, like, do not, like, you know, something like, don't follow your heart because the heart can deceive. So that's why it's true. Like the heart, what you follow is your gut. That's what you follow. Your gut instinct can't lie, because the solar plexus is connected to heaven. That's why Mary Magdalene, going back to the Last Supper, Mary Magdalene, and who would be sitting there if she was in there, she's the heart. And then you've got Virgin Mary, who's a solar plexus. What do they have in common? They have the same name, because they're both representing different aspects of the divine feminine. So the heart and the solar plexus are so intimately connected that when you do the heart work, guess what happens to the solar plexus? You start to receive intuition and discernment. That's basically God speaking to you through your gut. And that's wisdom.
I think a good example to give as well is in the last few years when those injections came out, a lot of people who I would consider to be very big-hearted people, their reaction or response was, it's for the greater good, whatever it is, experimental or whatever. We have to do this for the greater good. And I would consider those people being deceived by their heart.
Exactly.
Yeah, do you know what I'm just trying to get at in that kind of situation?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And that's why the balancing, the alchemical union is so important, because you could be so easily manipulated by being like unbalanced, by being too heart-centered and not balancing that out with the intellect. And then vice versa, because the intellect can be so disconnected from the heart that it can be manipulated into doing awful things, you know, because there's no empathy.
Because you've done a lot of that shadow work and you've done a lot of that integration and sacrificing of your time and energy. And so because of that, you've activated levels that can receive information.
You know, I have this thing about turning the problem into the solution. So for example, I was rescuing animals, and I've been doing this for 7 years, and I mean, I accumulated a massive credit card debt. I just kept collecting more animals with a credit card debt. I didn't know where I was going to go next, how I was going to afford to basically run this animal shelter all by myself. Like, but I had no choice but to turn the problem into the solution. So I started building a big following online, and that helps me with donations to be able to take care of them. And I use them. I make videos about them. I created an online following based on making videos about my animals. And so I used the problem to create the solution. And so with our wounds, it's kind of like the same kind of thing, where we have to transmute our wounds. Because think about it, if you never suffered in life, what happens when people suffer? What happens when they grieve? There's two options. You either become a worse person
And a victim.
You become hard-hearted, you build a wall around your heart, you become cynical,
bitter,
untrusting, or you transmute your suffering into like,
compassion, understanding.
yeah, like understanding is a big one, because what it should do is it should lead you into the direction of wanting to understand, wanting to look beyond the material, the physical, try to like understand what is the bigger picture, what is my purpose, what am I here for?
Why did this happen? Like, what role, what part did I play in this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
It's like
gravitate to
self-reflection.
exactly. Sometimes it could be things that you didn't like were completely out of your control. What happens when someone that we know dies? We grieve, we go to the funeral, and then what do most people do? They go back eventually after they've grieved, they go back to living every day as if they're never going to die. It's like they forgot, like they have all these reminders that life is transient and that nothing here is permanent, and yet they keep living. Once they've gotten over the grief, then they go back to living like they're never going to die. And that's doing things like when you invest your time and energy into physical pursuit and material pursuit.
Yeah.
What you're doing there is you're telling the universe, this is my home and I want to store my treasures here. So that doesn't help you ascend. That doesn't help you exit the matrix. What you want to do is tell the universe, this is not my home and I want to store my treasures in heaven. Because when you die, you don't take what you gained, you take what you gave. So when you are doing good things for others, you're storing your treasures in heaven. And people really miss that. Like even a lot of religious people, and it surprises me that a lot of Christian people miss that. Some of the most Christian people I know, their consciousness, like they're always thinking about material possessions. Like you have a conversation with them, they're talking about the car they're going to buy, the furniture they just bought, the interior design, of their house, the new plates and mugs. Like it totally like blows my mind, because I'm like, that's not what Jesus was about. It really boggles my mind. Like they think that like maybe 1 hour a week of volunteer work is like, they pat themselves on the back for that. When your life is all about the physical pursuits and the material pursuits, that's because you're operating in the lower mind. Like you need the lower mind. The lower mind is necessary, but you're operating too much in the lower mind. And so like literally, if people could balance the hemispheres of the brain, if people could move more into the high mind, we would have peace on earth. Like it would make all the difference. We can start doing that by not acting like addicts when information comes our way that sort of grinds up against what we already believe to be true. The truth it's not going to hurt you. It'll piss you off, but it's not going to hurt you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You would literally see peace among religions, because you would realize that religions like Christianity and Islam, I mean, people are going to lose their minds hearing me say this, but they are twin flame religions. It just doesn't look that way on the outside. It doesn't look like that exoterically. Exoterically, they look like they're at odds with each other. You don't have to chuck all your beliefs away. Just start to look at things allegorically. You will see that Jesus was born in the solar plexus and he was entombed in the heart. And then he went to Jerusalem and he ascended. And that's the third eye, right? Prophet Muhammad was born in the heart. He went to Jerusalem, he ascended, came back, and then died in the solar plexus, which is Medina. And that's why the Muslims consider Mecca, Medina, and Jerusalem as like the 3 holy sites. No, you're deceived. That's deception. That's demonic. That's new age, blah, blah, blah. And that the mind just shuts down straight away. I've heard many Christians say over my life that if you say that you need to change your diet or you need to do this or do that, like make changes in your life because in order to be saved, then that's offensive to God, because that's like saying what you did by sending your son to die on the cross wasn't enough. It wasn't good enough. So I'm going to have to make these changes to my life to make up for the fact that you didn't do enough to save me. Like, that's the mentality. And that is dangerous, because when you think like that, are you going to do the hard work of bringing the lower energy centers, of raising, of transmuting, of, of bringing, like, this is hard work. This is not easy. That means that every time you get triggered, you have to like start developing some self-awareness about those moments.
The biggest issue is our disconnection to ourselves. And that is observed in how so many people seek something outside of themselves to be their savior, to look for a way out. And part of that is religion. Who's coming to save us? Christ. Who's coming to save the world? Trump. There's so many examples out there of how people just sit there and seek outside of themselves for a savior. And it's so disempowering and disconnecting to what's in here and their own power. When they connect to their higher self, that has all the answers for you.
So when you say something like that, what people growing up in the Christian church used to say about that was like, no, but that's the self. Now you're talking about the self, and the self is a deception. That's a deception from the new age, from the devil, blah, blah, blah. But it's not the self, because you have the potential to open a portal inside you to heaven. You're not going into yourself as in like who you are in this state of amnesia, where you've forgotten where you're from, you've forgotten who you are, you think your name is Doris, but it's really not. But it's the part of you that has potential to open up a portal into heaven.
And going off that, and I think earlier you mentioned people might think you're crazy if you talk about the capabilities of when you activate that seed. I find it really interesting. If you look at a lot of the movies or a lot of the shows that we're seeing now, it's all got a superhero story, right? And I find that it's not a coincidence that there is a theme going on out there. And I feel like as time goes on and as we continue to evolve and people activate these seeds, gifts within us, and we raise it east or north and we start to activate dormant genes and gifts that we actually have that have been suppressed because we've been so in our lower desires and lower realms, we're going to access gifts that are going to be deemed, I suppose, satanic, or it's witchcraft. And I can see there's this priming going on for creating this programming and fear around superheroes. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
When we think about like manipulation of matter, which is how the pyramids were built, right? Matter was being manipulated through telekinesis. You've got the broomstick. Everyone knows the witches ride the broomstick. Then you've got the wizards with the staff and the rods. And then you've got the fairies with the wands. What do all these things represent? Broomstick, staff, wand, rod. What do they represent? I mean, even Moses had a staff and he parted the sea with it. It's the spine, the alignment of the chakras. If you're living in your lower energy centers, you can't have that chakra alignment, because in order to have it, you have to achieve the alchemical union, which means you have to come out of there up into the heart. So instead of being down in sex, survival, and power, you're now in love, speaking the truth, knowing the truth. And I really believe that AI is to cast doubt on the videos that are going to come out between now and the end of the age, which is not that far away, to cast doubt on people that are performing these miracles, so that people just go, oh, it's just AI. I think AI has been created to cast doubt so that people don't even believe the videos. At the end of the age, which I believe is going to be in 16 years, coming up to that, we're going to see these things happen.
So you mentioned you put a lot of your content on social media. Tell everyone where to find you and your content.
The.whitepill on Instagram. I go so deep. It's really hard to just make one self-contained video and put it out there and it's very hard for people to contextualize it because it's almost like it needs to be a course. You can go to my highlights and you can click through, you know, it's all there in order, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's almost like you're watching a documentary, because that's what I really need to do. I need to actually make a documentary by watching popular Netflix shows, movies, and having someone say, look at that, look at that, look at that, look at that.
I must say the challenge is not getting caught up in the main story being told and trying to ignore all the sound effects and the emotional elicited response, and looking through that and seeing what's actually being told, that second story, you know.
That's right. And you know, I've got to tell you something now. I don't know if I told you this, but remember we were watching The Chosen and we saw Thomas, Apostle Thomas, he clearly loved this girl called Rama. And then I said, this relationship's not going to work. Remember? And I said, this isn't going to turn out. I don't know if I told you this, but they just released season 4 and they killed her off.
Oh, you didn't tell me that. No. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I thought that it would just not work out somehow. I didn't think they would actually kill her off. She wasn't even a biblical character. And when they killed her off, there was so much outrage on Twitter and everything. And people were like, but hang on, she wasn't even a biblical character. And you had to go and create her a non-biblical character. And then you had to go and kill her off, such a likable character. Then you had to go kill her off in such a tragic way. And nobody's talking about the symbolism of killing her off. Like, it's so incredibly symbolic. And it blew my mind that they would do it in that way. Jesus only had one disciple that was married for a reason. There's a very good reason why Simon Peter was the only married disciple, and he was the one that Jesus said he changed his name to Peter, to rock, to stone. Peter was the foundation of the church. So that's because Peter's wife represented the heart, and Peter was Aries. So, you know, Peter is the higher mind, and Aries, and that's third eye. So him being married represented the fact that he had accomplished the alchemical union, which is why he was the foundation of the kingdom, of the church. When they introduced this possibility that another disciple would get married, I was like, there's only one married disciple for a reason, and there's no way they're going to let this disciple get married, especially because we all know, all the Christians know, that he has a nickname, and that's Doubting Thomas. And that's because when Jesus resurrected, he didn't believe it until he saw him with his own eyes. Even after everything he'd seen Jesus do, he still has skepticism. And you know what that means? That means that he's in his lower mind, that he's too much in the lower mind because there's skepticism. He didn't have enough faith. And we know that happens at the end. And so that's how I knew this character is definitely like, and if any disciple was going to get married, it would be anyone but him. And the fact that they chose that disciple to almost get married and then have this big tragic ending with her being killed off, like, it is so insanely symbolic. And I cannot believe I'm the only one that can see it. Like, I'm like, there's surely others that can see this.
Well, this will be the first of many of our chats, I think. Annette, what do you reckon?
Yeah, we'll do more and we'll go into more detail.
I think that's a lot for everyone to digest for the moment. It's been such a good chat. I'm sure there will be people who will be upset. There'll be people who will be mind blown. There'll be people who would be a bit overwhelmed and lost and confused. What kind of advice would you give people who are listening and they're struggling? What's something that you'd want to leave people with?
The most intelligent people walking the planet, the smartest people walking the planet are walking straight into traps. A lot of people want to get stuck in the intellect. Start prioritizing the heart work.
I do believe that for certain information that needs to be embodied is resonated when you clear those blockages internally. So that's why what you're saying is the key. The heart is the key, because when there is a trauma there, there's a blockage to receive that information. in here, in the gut, in the heart, or whatever. So essentially, don't worry too much about up here, because that's not enough. And what's gonna unlock this is unlocking this and connecting them together.